Good afternoon, everyone. Again, we've got a very busy United States Senator who is doing double duty, trying to determine what the president's saying, making a vote on the floor of the United States Senate, rushing back here to talk to all of us that are Senator worldwide today. And we just thank you for your time. Let me give you a brief introduction to someone that I have great admiration for. Senator Maria Cantwell obviously represents the great state of Washington. She's the chair of the Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee, and she's also the senior member of Energy and Natural Resources and a senior member on the Finance Committee. I think I could tell you that there's no one in the United States Senate, or I would argue in the House, who has had more input into the infrastructure bill than Senator Cantwell with those committee assignments, and particularly her chairmanship of a core committee to that effort. Senator Cantwell came to Congress after both a long-serving public record in the House and in the state legislature, spent a good amount of time as an innovator in the private sector, and she clearly is a national thought leader and an innovator and someone who works effectively across the aisle to achieve legislation. The two biggest attributes that I see in her personally is, Maria, you remind me of the Wayne Gretzky of the United States Senate, who once said, "I skate where the puck is going to be, not where it has been." And I can't think of a better description of your career in following issues and trends and innovations, and you've been a stalwart in the Senate in that regard. My favorite part of you is the fact that I deem you to be Gonzaga University's basketball team #1 fan. Senator, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Tim, and thanks to everybody at the 13th Annual North America Infrastructure Leadership Forum for inviting me today to participate in this forum. Welcome to everybody, and thank you for your participation. We're here today to talk about a range of issues related to infrastructure investment, and I am pressed to look over my shoulder here and listen and see what the president is continuing to outline as part of his strategic plan. I think most of you know by now he went to the House of Representatives this morning and talked about a framework that is an investment about $1.75 billion. So perhaps I'll try to brief a little bit about that and some of the areas in which we might need continued discussion and dialogue. But we're here today because there's people in this room that are interested not just in roads and bridges, but you're interested in our grid technology, our mass transit, our water infrastructure. There are probably people there that care about housing, and probably even some people that want to know the ancillary impacts of our innovation economy, like broadband, and where, in fact, we locate research and development. So today we live in an information age economy, and it's changing, and the world economy, even slowed down by COVID, is still continuing to grow. And that growth is literally a competitiveness issue for our nation. U.S. competitiveness is currently being challenged by how to cost effectively deliver products to new markets, and how effective our cities can basically get workers to work or give them broadband at home, or how we provide affordable housing. Several years ago, I was really inspired by a Port of Seattle executive who laid out a clarion call on infrastructure strategy when she wrote an article for the Seattle Times. Basically, it was about the port of Valparaiso in Chile. Prior to 1914, Valparaiso was a very vibrant port, and really the preferred port for ships taking the long route around South America. And its impact on the Chilean economy was quite significant. But when the Panama Canal opened, shortening the time it took ships to get to the Pacific, Valparaiso instantly became a shadow of its former self. That struck fear in me as I looked at the competitiveness of the ports of Seattle and Tacoma, the fact that they faced competition. And her message was about the fact that the Panama Canal was completing their canal widening, which was around 2015, and that with over 200,000 jobs at stake at the port of Seattle and Tacoma, we too could lose competition if we didn't respond to these Panamax ships and the very much deepening of what was transpiring around the globe. So her response to that and the ports of Seattle and Tacoma made me very focused on getting a new national freight policy. One that basically said, let's invest transportation dollars in infrastructure that actually moves product and helps us get those products to their needed destination. This important piece of legislation has now grown into our national freight priority, which we are also trying to enhance in this infrastructure bill. Improving our products is not just important within the United States, but our economic competitors like China, India, and Europe have spent billions of dollars on their transportation infrastructure, on their energy and water systems. But now more than half of the world's population has reached middle class, and we know that 95% of consumers live outside the United States. So those middle class markets in places like China and India are expected to be worth somewhere between 14 and 12 trillion respectively. So this means a great opportunity for the United States if we can get those products moved and get them to those markets. So I do want to thank the White House for their leadership and for the bipartisan $1.2 trillion infrastructure plan and legislation that I hope we will be voting on in a final form very, very soon, because it is very important to get that infrastructure investment underway. I want to talk about a few of the things that are in that infrastructure bill that I think our committee, specifically the Commerce Committee, worked on that were very, very important. It includes a continued investment in the infra program, as I just mentioned, the program that is moving freight. It is an $8 billion investment and a 60% increase from where we were previously. This infra program is so critical because it is literally helping us deal with congestion all across the United States. And as a community, or a state, I should say, that is on the Pacific, in a time and era when the Pacific's economy is only going to grow, getting Midwest product through our ports is critical. The legislation also includes the bipartisan bill, $5 billion for mega projects. These mega projects are projects of national significance, like the I-5 bridge in Vancouver, Washington, to cross into Oregon, that would help us at a national level get the right investment done in these infrastructure projects and help not have them put aside every year because they're just so costly. The United States has to take these projects of national significance and help these communities deal with them if we want our economies to grow. And the legislation also includes $3 billion for at-grade crossings. One of the things we've found in the state of Washington with all of our ports, and I'm sure that many people on this call have experienced the same, is that this movement of US products to the Asian market literally has clogged some of our biggest cities. Our rail moves through these cities and to the ports and then on to the Pacific. But yet that just very last mile can be a great congestion point in an urban area. So having cities be able to be helped by an at-grade crossing program literally helps us with our investments of moving those products and giving cities some flexibility. I just happen to live in a community in the state of Washington, Edmonds, Washington, that is on Puget Sound, that has a ferry that leads to the peninsula, the Olympic Peninsula, but runs with a railroad track right in front of it. So all of that multimodal has to operate effectively. And congestion was so bad, we recently had a woman who was coming across the ferry pregnant, and then literally the train stopped for several hours and she couldn't get across the tracks. So these are things that we need to fix in our communities, and our communities want the help. What's unique about the at-grade crossing program is that we're giving the money to the individual cities so they can solve some of these problems. It's not to say we don't want the cooperation with the states and regional and federal government, but we know that these little communities across the United States need the help and support of a program specifically targeted to them. The second big investment you're going to see in this legislation is $2.5 billion for new transmission facility program that is part of helping us make our grid smarter and more intelligent. We all know, we've seen the hacks on our system, that we need better security, we need increased intelligence, and we need universal broadband. So I'm hoping that the start of this legislation of making a more intelligent grid helps us diversify our energy sources, but also builds a two-way communication system so that we can enable a smarter device, smarter application, if you will, turn our grid more into an operating system than it currently is today. This will empower, I believe, a revolution of products and services and the ability to move electricity around in a very important time. Currently, we're already seeing the impacts of climate. And when a storm happens, or hot temperatures, all of a sudden our grid is unreliable. Even when we have enough energy, we just can't get it to the right spot at the right time. So this $2.5 billion investment will help us make the improvements to our grid that I think will yield many benefits and help address some of the weaknesses that we saw in the Colonial Pipeline attack. We saw how intruders could attack our system and bring our economy down for days because of that. And one of the things that I believe investing in fiber for the future of our grid will do is help make our grid more secure. This kind of closed loop communication system could actually help us take some of these systems and make them more secure from invaders who are constantly trying to hack our system. We need our grid to be secure. We need our grid to operate and keep our economy going. And it's clear there are many people and many state actors who see it as a ripe opportunity to cause havoc with our economy. So these investments, I hope, are just the beginning in what we are going to do to get our grid to be more redundant, reliable, and resilient for the future. And let me just say a word about housing, since I know that some of you may not be in the housing business, but you understand getting affordable housing is a key aspect to our economy. Housing right now, we have more than 10 million people in the United States who are rent burdened. That is, they pay more than 50% of their income in rent. We have more than a need for 7 million new units of affordable housing in the United States. So pushing an affordable housing tax credit as part of the president's plan, which we think needs to still be in the final product, is a great way to build more affordable units throughout the United States of America. If we can't get our workforce to where the work is, if we can't get people to support our communities and they have to live further and further and further out because of the cost of housing, that is a burden on our infrastructure. So I hope that people will look at infrastructure and look at housing in including it as part of an agenda so that we take more burden off of our infrastructure system by having affordable housing in urban areas. These are the priorities that we're fighting for here in Washington, D.C. And you can see that the president's speech today, he's committed to moving forward on that agenda. I don't know when we'll have votes. I hope that they will be soon. And I hope we will be able to make these investments. But I really do think that infrastructure is about our competitiveness for the future. I will just leave you with one example of a freight program that has enabled us to stave off problems in our own community. It's called the Lander Street Project. Literally, it is just a block or two long, but all of this product coming all the way across the United States left I-5 and somehow couldn't just get those final miles to the Port of Seattle. It had to go through urban congestion. It had to cross a railroad track. It had to deal with the rail systems that were there. And it had to get through the ferry congestion and to the port. So we built a bridge over Lander Street. And Lander Street had been a problem. It had been a security issue. It had been a issue of fatality. It had been an issue of basically constraining the area. But when we built Lander Street, we really built a bridge to the future. Those products knew where they were going. They needed to get to Asia. But that little last mile was the solution that we needed. And in my mind, Lander Street represents so much about what our infrastructure needs are in the United States. Sometimes they are just the last mile or just the last bit of investment that we need to unleash a major aspect of our economy. So I just thank you for the opportunity to work with all of you on these investment strategies for the future. Let's not be afraid to propose things that will work and better enable us. Let's not be afraid to fight for the dollars that will literally unleash billions of dollars of investment and put so many Americans to work. Thank you all very much for this opportunity.
Thanks, Senator. Do you have time for a couple of rapid questions? I know you got to get out and vote, so I want to respect that time. We don't want to have you miss it. A quick one, your colleague and friend, Congressman Larson, was on just about a half an hour ago, and he indicated that the president did a great job in the presentation to the caucus, and that he is anticipating votes in the House tonight and tomorrow on the package, which is good optimism. But can you give us your take on two parts? One, what do you think the general time frame is if that was to work? The Senate would the Senate take it up immediately? And then second, what's your hope for at least some level of bipartisanship on the infrastructure package in terms of passing this?
Well, we'll see what happens today in the House, but I am sure that the Senate will take up immediately anything that the House passes. Obviously, we've already passed the bipartisan infrastructure bill, so that could just go to the president's desk unless there were changes. And the reconciliation bill, which also has major investments in it, also would be taken up, I think, quickly. The question is, I think there are parts of the package, particularly on the finance and tax policy and on energy policy, that haven't been finally tuned in the legislation. So I'm not sure we're actually going to see legislative language today on those. I hope so. Maybe that is something that they will be able to release, or once they've introduced what they think is a basic package, do a manager's amendment to it. But from what I've understood, there's a few things that are still left to work out. So we hope our colleagues will give it due diligence and ask important questions and try to move forward on a framework that the president outlined this morning.
This next question is from your good friend, Gordon Arbuckle, who's here. And he asked, as chair of the Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation, and a senior member on the Energy and Natural Resources Committee, who played a critical role in the development of the legislation, what are some of the critical issues we need to continue to prioritize in the legislation, and what needs to improve in the long run?
Well, the president asked, I think, originally in his plan, he wanted $100 billion in transmission investment. I think modernizing our grid, making it a secure two-way communication system, making it robust to operate with the intelligence that I think that our utilities are starting to see is possible, particularly as the electricity, as we diversify our grid in general, is going to take more investment. So I think this is the key area. I think we will get a down payment on the grid modernization, smart grid, interties, siting, the things that are part of this legislation. But I think we're going to need a lot more for the future.
The last question, Senator, that has come up is we know the role that you played in the bill in terms of the largest expansion of broadband and really dealing with some of the inherent issues. Can you comment a little bit about where you see both the good parts of the legislation, but also pieces of that legislation that are going to have to evolve and change, particularly for people who don't have access to broadband, which I know you care deeply about? Can you,
Well,
can you give some comments on that?
Listen, America, we're working hard to get America's competitiveness, to a higher level, even on the research and development side. So that means you could have more products and services in more places. You could have more research in more places. But if you're limited by broadband, that's not going to happen. And so we are fighting hard to get a true map understanding of where broadband exists in the United States. A company in our state, Microsoft, has done some really great work. We'll give people a link to it, but they can show you by zip code where in the United States of America we currently don't have broadband at affordable rates. And unfortunately, there are tens of millions of people in the United States of America that don't have affordable broadband. So we still have an urban problem, and then we have a hard to serve community problem because of geographics or the lack of people seeing a market and thereby not wanting to go there and deliver service. And what I think that everybody will tell you is that fiber is going to play a very big role in building out that broadband for the future. And that broadband does something very unique. It allows you to also have that two-way communication that the utilities want to have to build out this smarter grid. So it's very beneficial. And we're finding some very, very unique applications to the intelligence that you can get out of the grid. That is, people are saying you will be able to even detect fires and more smartly shut down electricity than we're currently doing today. That obviously gets our colleagues very interested, given the challenges we see from a changing climate and the devastation we've seen from wildfires. But we also have to address a stronger security layer for our grid. The United States economy is more and more dependent on the electricity grid, and people are seeing that they can target it more for attack. So we don't want to have a cyber 9/11. We want to have a resilient and redundant grid, and building a stronger fiber communication system could really help us do that.
We appreciate that. Now, the worldwide audience wants to know your predictions for the Zags, and then we're going to let you go for this year.
Well, I guarantee it's going to be an exciting season.
Thank you, Senator.
I think Chet Holmgren is going to be the kid to watch. So
he is. Go get him. Pass this bill.
Thank you. Thank you.